Hello, I'm Lindy Gooden. Welcome to Insurance Innovators live discussion, Rebuilding Trust in Insurance, hosted in association with Smart Communications and Salesforce Industries. Great to have you in the world today. Now, insurance has suffered a great, I argue, in trust than any other financial services sector during the pandemic. Long contact center queues, frustrating digital and chatbot experiences sometimes, plus damaging publicity about disappointed claimants. Look, they've all undermined customer confidence. So, as we try to put the pandemic behind us, there's now a burning need for the industry to build a better customer-insurer relationship. But honestly, how do we do that? Well, today we're here to explore exactly how digital developments, perhaps driven by AIs and new data from connected devices, could turn the ship around. We'll investigate how the industry can take hold of the opportunity to move from simple, if it is simple, risk mitigation to trusted advisor. Lots of big topics to get through. So let's meet the panel of experts helping us to do it. First of all, Dan Feen. Hello, Dan.
Good afternoon. Delighted to be here today, Ron.
Great to have you with us. Dan is Group Chief Operating Officer at Marcus Study Insurance, the UK's fifth largest provider. Now, Dan joined in 2011 to head up the group and product management divisions and led the rebrand of the division to Empowered. He's a leader and a strategist with over 30 years of experience and also sits on the Marcus Study board. Great to have you with us, Dan. Secondly, we have Amy Britell. Hello, Amy.
Good afternoon.
Great to see you there. Amy is Head of Customer UK Claims at Zurich Insurance Group. She leads the claims with overall responsibility for claims relationship management, digital proposition development, market insight, market voice, anagrams. So in other words, Amy, lots. Great to have you with us. So we have Sue McCall. Hello, Sue.
Hi.
Great to see you there. This is the chair of the Society of Claims Professionals, which is part of the Chartered Insurance Institute. Now, Sue has over 30 years of experience in operational and technical claims management across most classes. She has worked in and Lloyd's market, including nearly 9 years spent as head of claims. Great to have you with us, Sue. Okay, fourthly, we have Neil Greathead. Hello.
Hi, Linley. Good to see you again.
Good to see you again. Neil is Chief Customer Officer at Smart Communications. He leads customer success management, professional services and training teams, all to help customers to more efficiently scale the conversation. Great to have you with us again. And last but certainly not least is Jim Bruce. Hello, Jim.
Good afternoon, Linley. Pleasure to be with you.
Pleasure to have you with us. Jim is Senior Director, Customer Transformation at Salesforce. His industry experience spans financial services, including generally healthcare, life and investments. And before joining Salesforce, he spent firstly as Global Sales, Strategy and Marketing Director, and secondly, as Chief Operating Officer. So we have a lot of expertise on the panel today. You at home or in the office are the sixth person on our panel today, and you're bound to have your own burning questions or comments for us. As always, we want to put your questions direct to the panel a little bit later on. Simply post them in the Ask the Panel section, which you can see on the right-hand side of the screen right now while we're live. You'll drive the last 10 to 15 minutes of our session, so send them in and we'll get to as many as we can towards the end of our discussion today. If you don't have questions, but you would like to share experiences with us, you can also join the debate by tweeting throughout the webinar using the hashtag on Twitter, which today, while we're live again, is InsuranceTrust21. Let us know what you think. Do it publicly for the world to see and to digest and debate. Okay, let's get started. Customer trust obviously took a battering during the pandemic, didn't it? In fact, in our recent survey, 91% of over 200 executives surveyed from across the insurance industry expect trust to tumble even further. That's a very big stat, isn't it? And we all know that customer trust was a very delicate thing for insurers way before COVID-19. So Jim, kick us off. Look, why do you think traditionally there's been a bit of an issue in consumer confidence with the industry?
Yeah, I think traditionally there's a few areas, but traditionally probably first and foremost, nobody really enjoys paying for goods that they really don't want to use in the longer term. I think the industry's gone through a few fairly high profile challenges in terms of loan protection, low utilisation rates, dual pricing, and more recently the business kind of challenge that's been covered fairly widely in the press industries probably, and this is not the whole industry, but some players be kind of challenged by a race to the bottom on price, which inevitably has a consequence on customer intimacy and quality of the communications we're having with the customers.
Absolutely, and I'm sure everyone at home and on our panel has an idea and personal experience on how that's been an uphill struggle. But let's talk about relationship for a second. Look, when you're racing to the bottom, Amy, and you don't have that real relationship, an ongoing repeat relationship, trust and confidence can be very hard to find, can't they?
Yeah, they can. I guess, in sort of my world, claims, it's potentially the first time we've had a really meaningful and probably emotional conversation with the customer. Jim alluded to it, often nobody wants to purchase insurance. It's a little bit of a distress purchase, but point of claim, you really need it to come through for you. So I think for me, we have an opportunity at claims to really build a relationship, and we know actually that has a really high correlation with whether or not somebody will renew with us. But I think there is opportunity to bring that relationship more throughout the journey and more upfront in the journey. So.
Yeah. Dan, there is research out there, isn't there? There is, clearly there's data within business, but there's also, and there's plenty of anecdotal experience, but something that you've seen recently that might throw some light on it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. There's an excellent McKinsey report that really brings this to life, which shows the average person has four touch points with an insurer a year, as opposed to 120 touch points with their bank. So it doesn't give us many opportunities as an insurer to provide that kind of value add service that customers are looking for.
Yeah. Neil, actually 4 times a year to talk to your insurer sounds like a lot to me. It's always difficult to build a relationship and to go where we're going today, talking about trust and confidence, if you're not in touch, if you're not having that conversation.
Yeah, that's right. And I think it's really important to think about, as kind of Amy said, the broader customer experience, the journey itself. It starts from, hey, I'm just looking for an insurance provider. And that very first interaction, whether it's website, telephone call, whatever it may be, is just how clearly are you communicating with what you offer, what you can deliver, and then can you keep up with that? And I'm sure we're going to dive into lots of other kind of avenues of conversation around how we do that. But I think it's massively important to think about the journey itself.
And you mentioned clarity. That's very important. So let's get you involved. Look, what components do you think are essential to build trust among new customers? Obviously, that will apply across existing customers too. But look, clarity has been mentioned by Neil. What else do we need to get right?
I think we have to give them confidence in the policy and in the provider. To do that, we need to be honest and transparent, at the point of sale and throughout the customer journey. So we get the customer to quickly understand the cover that's being provided under the terms of the policy, and so that there's no scope at a later stage for confusion.
Yeah.
It's
so clarity's, again, that's clarity, isn't it? That's making sure that people from the word go understand what they're getting, and also again, it's down to confidence. Have an understanding, therefore a reassurance that this is what I need, and it will help me if times are tough.
Yeah, policy wordings they're complex in their nature, and particularly on the commercial side. So, it's about trying to keep it as simple as we possibly can, and to highlight the exclusions, at an early stage, so that they know what they're buying. And because we are looking at new customers, we know that 1 in 6 shift, certainly in the personal line space, shift customers, to a new provider. So we haven't got that loyalty built. And as Amy, alluded to, at the point of the claim comes in, then, that's where we do tend to impress, and we, that's where the loyalty builds. But we know historically they've looked at, the claim service and it's been better than anticipated. So with a new customer, you don't have that. So you're then looking at how you can, build it from the point of sale.
Really good. So that's very, very important. I'm going to throw this around for a second. Jim, look, there's something in marketing world which you came from, in that to delight your customers, to go above and beyond what they expected is a very good thing. Unfortunately, the word's not getting out, is it? And this is an eternal problem, Jim. How do you start to help customers to understand actually that we will be there for you? I guess that's very important if you're going to, yes, at the point of claim, but also across the journey, you're getting value for money, you're getting some value and benefit out of the back of it.
Yeah, I think the important thing is that you've got to get to know your customers, and you've got, as the guys have said, that there's not many points of interaction. So when we do get the opportunity to interact, it's got to be exceptional. The days of 24-hour turnarounds, 48-hour turnarounds, 5-day SLAs. Those are gone. We still actually use them within our industry, but cross industry, those are just no longer relevant. And so therefore, when the consumer is actually utilising our service, it's got to be exceptional, and we've got to be on a par with outside industry parallels. And those are just some examples that I would give. And also, we've got to know them, and we've got to know them intimately when they actually do speak to us. And so I think it's important that single customer view and areas like that are really critical as we look to enhance our propositions.
Absolutely. Amy, we'll come on to predictive in a second, and we'll get across that very large issue. But just on communications, Neil, to make the information pass very well to customers and the insurer, but also just, more than that, have that depth of understanding. That's going to have to be, I guess, as we come out of the pandemic, one of the focus points, a real focus point, and it has to be practical and it has to work in the real world.
Yeah, I think it's not beyond the pandemic. It's right now. That's what kind of customers who, depending on where they are in their engagement with you, they're looking for an interaction that is real, that is transparent, that is meaningful for them in a way that we're not just talking to a number. We're talking to an individual who's got concerns, and the interactions need to be, I know you, I know what you do, who you are, the personalization. I'm sure we'll talk about that as well, and using kind of like big data. So it's pivotal, kind of before the pandemic, in the pandemic, and after the pandemic. I think the pandemic has just accelerated the need for stronger communications.
Absolutely, and we'll talk about data in more detail and personalization, all that stuff with Dan very shortly. But Amy, let's turn it to predict and prevent. Risk mitigation, the bread and butter of the industry. But as data is used clearly a lot more, how do you start to move into a predict and prevent model? What do you have to get right? What do you have to aim at to make that happen?
It's a big question, isn't it? Because I guess if we as an industry really got this right, we'd do ourselves out of a job. Because at the moment we're there when things go wrong, and you're talking about creating an environment where we don't let them go wrong in the first place. So I think it's a fascinating concept, and I think it is one that has societal and customer benefit, but I think we're some way off it. I think there's some interim steps along the way. I mean, we're probably sort of in the maybe risk reduction or risk prevention or early intervention stage. So I've seen some really interesting things out there at the moment in terms of like telematics, in terms of, customer hasn't got to contact us. If it is one of the 4 times a year, let's maybe contact them instead and say, look, we understand that this has just happened. This is what we're doing to help. We've already deployed X, Y, and Z. But I think that kind of completely turning the industry on its head, but could be an exciting concept.
In some ways, I mean, you're right though, aren't you? Because in telematics, for example, it's relatively invisible, to the customer, but yet they've got that kind of, there is a real understanding of what's going on, and that's a very good physical example of how you can track and understand what they're doing and how they're driving, for example. But is it a case of just being basically invisible and always there to help out when you need it? Is there a way of bumping the relationship up to at least that level?
I think there is, and I think people buy insurance because they want to take some risk or they want to do something. I think us enabling that and being there when they need us, rather than us having to come to us, I think creates some really interesting opportunities.
We'll come back to trust in a second, because it is going to be the key feature of our conversation today with Neil. But Dan, in terms of how a predict and prevent model could really reshape the relationship, what comes to mind for you? What do you think will be the big changes?
Yeah, I mean, I think we are on we're at an exciting point. I do agree with Amy that there's limitations to technology, but if we just build on the telematics, so the traditional black box that you don't see, we're now starting to put in video telematics, so we can actually see what the driver sees. So we can actually start giving back some more engagement, more than just kind of lots of numbers on driving behaviour. So for commercial fleets, we can also now use facial recognition to see if the driver's aware, looking in the right direction, if the seatbelt's been put on. So there's lots of use cases where we can actually move to more of a pay-as-you-go type model, or a usage-based insurance, rather than the traditional, you've had an accident, we've got some data, we can see who's at fault. So I think we are on that kind of cusp.
So and we'll come back to you a little bit more on that in a second. But but so it's, invisible. I suppose I threw in a curveball there, Amy, because I talked about being invisible. That's the last thing really you want. You want engagement rather than to just be a silent partner that will be there whenever I need you. But Neil, in terms of existing customers and trust again, there are certain things that you can learn very much from good examples of what you've done, and yes, using data and using those technologies. But there are great examples of what you can take from customer relationship now and build that into new customers, build that into future customers, aren't there?
Yeah, that's right. I think when we kind of think about it, when we engage with our customers who are insurers, I think rather than kind of thinking about what's kind of not working, I think it's kind of interesting to think about what we see our insurance companies doing and what they're trying to address. And for me, it kind of comes into 4 areas with existing customers. There's the claims process that Amy's already spoken about. And really what they're trying to understand there is how easy is it? How easy is it to engage? How do we take the emotion out of it? Because it's a stressful time. Is it multi-channel? Is it omni-channel, opti-channel? And we'll talk about that a bit later. So, what are those kind of touch points that we speak about within the actual claims process, and how do you make each one of those relevant and meaningful? So I think that's claims. I think there's the renewal side as well. Is it jargon free? Is it easy to understand? I think that's number 2. We're also seeing for the third element, which is personalization and tailored policies. It's using the data that Dan spoke about earlier and Amy and Sue, which is like, how do we ensure we can create policies that are meaningful for me rather than just an off the shelf? And then I think the fourth one that we see a lot of our insurance companies trying to kind of grapple with and change is loyalty for existing customers. How do we ensure that we reward customers for staying loyal, for being brand ambassadors, etc.? So they're the 4 categories that we see our insurance companies working on.
Everybody watching us today may have to rewind. You may have to rewind and go on demand to watch this because there's a lot packed in already.
Sorry, there was a lot.
No, it's great. It's fantastic. But Jim, just to finish off this section, we'll move on in a second to the challenge of engagement, the practical challenge. But simple steps, if there are any, to go from reactive to proactive from here on out.
Yeah, and Neil's touched on a few of them actually, but first and foremost, it's a courage to invest in change, and a lot of that change is already happening. But I think that we've mentioned it a number of times now: customer intimacy and really knowing the customer exceptionally well, intellectualizing the data that we're talking about, in terms of making it intelligent and understanding what the customer might be looking for from a predictive perspective, and also from a predictive perspective in terms of losses and potential claims, and then looking beyond that and actually being far more innovative around products. And we've mentioned a couple of those more innovative kind of product lines, but if we're looking at whole of health, where a lot of the health insurers are now looking right from the outset at wellness and improving your health and well-being, and some of the other examples across the products, then I think we've got a terrific opportunity. In terms of some of the technologies that will be required to do that, I've touched upon a few of them in terms of, we'll need to intellectualize our data. Most large insurance houses have got, huge amounts of data. In fact, probably verging on inundated with data, but it's not intellectual. So we need to work out ways in which APIs or whatever it is necessary to really intellectualize that data. And also making sure that we get to the customer at the right time through the right channel at every opportunity.
Absolutely. Okay, well, let's keep on moving. That's how the industry could perhaps change to build consumer trust, but there also needs to be a real tangible value, doesn't there, in that mix? So let's talk about the tools, the technologies, and the processes practically that we can put in place to benefit everybody. Sue, first of all, what are the big challenges, do you think, in the way of becoming a genuinely trusted advisor? How do you get customers to take notice of that advice and really, for the insurer to focus on trust and that advice point first before the product gets sold out?
Yeah, I think Jim's touched upon that. It's to make sure that the advice translates into tangible reductions in the level of risk that's presented. So the customers then have to be active participants and willing to engage with the carriers and to act upon the advice that's provided, and that that advice, once delivered, if it's delivered through sort of risk reduction, through premium perhaps, that then they'll definitely be sitting up.
Yeah. It's
So,
funny,
yeah.
isn't it? Because I remember with smart meters when they were rolled out initially,
Yeah.
you know, the energy suppliers believed that people would be literally forget the TV, move the TV to one side. I'd be sat there looking at my smart meter usage and the price I'm paying, and they didn't. So it's a difficult one, isn't it, to have that to feel that, again, feeling the value of the service that I have from insurer. That's a difficult nut to crack.
But I think if you looked at it in commercial, you know, in a commercial sense, where your surveyor goes out, your risk manager goes out, and then they say, you know, there'll be trips and slips if you don't tidy up the you know, the walkway, or your forklift truck, you know, needs some demarcation. You know, you're working together to reduce the risk, to reduce injury, you know, and ultimately there will be, you know, a payback to the policyholder is that there will be less claims frequency, less employees injured, less time off work, etc. So you can see that, you know, that kind of, you know, the whole kind of process of you know, well, I guess, you know, it works for the insured and it works for the insurers. And the same can happen and will happen, I believe, in the personal line space.
It's being comfortable, isn't it, in many ways? Yes, Jim.
Yeah, I think there's also a piece about moral duty and building affordability. So, you know, building the ability for people who are not affording the insurance propositions at the moment, to extend that footprint, and also even just across environmentally, we've got you know, obligations there that actually, you know, this all fits into perfectly. So I do think in terms of building trust, it's broader than just the, you know, the old traditional insurance policy type thing. I think we've got a responsibility from a broader perspective.
That's quite a lot of nodding going on there. Neil, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do, and I think it's also, I think there's elements of not just about the policy, it's about the engagement and adding value and enriching an individual's life, however that may be. And it doesn't have to be the social element that you see a lot of, but insurance is important, and I think we need to help our customers understand the why and the how, rather than just the jargon and the policy and the form itself, or whatever it may be.
Yeah, and insurance can become sexy when it allows you, it enables you to do new things, to do things that you couldn't do before. That becomes something that I can get a value from that, definitely. Amy, what about personalization? Let's get straight into more data. How can you encourage customers to offer more data? Is there a natural way of doing it? Is there a way that perhaps means that relationship goes together with the relationship?
Can I just reflect on the previous point before I answer that? Because it's like Jim sort of opened up a real personal passion of mine, which is I think people have forgotten where insurance grew up from. We're fundamentally a societal project with the industry that put fire hydrants on the street, that put sprinklers in schools. And I think we've lost some of that swagger in terms of the contribution we do make to society. And I think getting some of that back will also breed further trust.
Yeah, I think, and if you said that to most customers, they'd go, really?
Yeah.
They wouldn't relate that at all to insurance. That's the difficulty, isn't it? Yeah.
So sorry, I couldn't help but reflect on the previous comment. But in terms of how can we encourage customers to give more data? It comes back to the same thing. I think for me, it's trust. I think people have got to trust that we'll do something and we'll take that data responsibility. I mean, Zurich got a very public sort of data commitment around that. But also, Sue touched on it. I think it's got to be meaningful. We've got to do something with it. And I think we should only ask for what we need. So just to kind of bring that to life, I guess, in terms of it being meaningful and helpful, Dan talked about telematics. And, people were quite suspicious about having black boxes in their car. But if you go to the kind of video guidance that Dan talked about, or indeed we've got a product now where you have some form of telematics that tracks your mileage, but we will then charge you by the mile, which, people then get meaning and value from that. So they're far more willing to let you into their world. And I think in terms of only asking for what we need, there's so much external data out there. Customers don't want to take time filling in forms, telling us things that we should already know about them, or indeed at point of claim, things we should already know. So for me, it's about making it meaningful, treating it well, and only asking for what we need.
Yeah, you put your suspicions to one side when you have control, when you know that you can control that relationship a bit. So if you're able to communicate that and make sure that people feel in control, you're going to go quite a long way to trust, aren't you?
For sure.
Dan, let's just develop. Oh yes, sorry, Neil, briefly, yeah.
Yeah, so just on that one from Amy, about the data piece, I think we've probably all experienced, but let's take the renewal element. We've all experienced your policy is up, would you like to renew? You say yes, and then you have to fill the whole form in again. And it's like, well, you know who I am. why don't you say, do you want the same? Is this all okay? And that's about, then becomes a customer experience. Like if you're engaging with me, knowing who I am, that becomes a much better interaction and conversation, as opposed to I'm now in a process.
Yeah. Imagine if we just asked, has anything changed since last year?
Yeah, exactly. And hit yes to renew. Perfect. Done.
Exactly. Dan, we talked about some of the techniques to use the new tech to, for instance, see whether somebody's alert behind the wheel and that sort of thing. How important do you think the role of wearables, of IoT, is that really at the vanguard, the front of the new generation of tech that will help insurers to have that relationship, to have a seamless relationship, even if it's not invisible?
Well, I think certainly it's a whole new ecosystem which we should be looking at. I think as individuals, and kind of linking back to the last question, as individuals, we're starting to get a sense to the value of our personal data. And if we know that actually by trading that data, we're going to get good products and good services and good value, we're more likely to do that. And if we trust, and if we can see that it's been ethically used and it's safe. So I think wearables and telematics, they all kind of fall into that space. It's data being driven and created by our customers, which we're then going to use to make better products for them. So it definitely is a rich source of information, but we need to be transparent as an industry as to how we're going to use it. And we're using it, ethically, and in trading that data with us. These are the things that the customer is going to get.
And the ethics, Sue, briefly, the ethics do come back to that clarity, that communication that we talked about before. To at the point of claim in particular, and Neil mentioned it, to reduce the emotion, to make it something that can actually work and work as simply and quickly as possible when the chips are down.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, there's a number of insurers who've been quite innovative in the way that they approach it. We know, for instance, that sort of, I think it's 1 in 8 suffer or have an increased chance of stress following a major flood, over a 12-month period. So, and that 1 in 4 adults have some sort of mental health issue any 12, so you've got all the vulnerable customer piece, which is huge, and it gets bigger at the point of claim. So then it's about providing the right support. So some insurers, for instance, will at the point of a major loss, provide some form of mental health support. There's lots of ways of helping to handhold at the right time in the right way. I think that's what's really important.
And it's a very human thing to do, which has perhaps been lost and stripped away in the business of insurance over the last X years. Absolutely,
yeah. You go through a process, which is your claim comes in, and then we send you out to our white goods suppliers or whatever. You go down this route. This is, there's a more human element to this, and insurers have been responding to that over recent years. And I think, despite the damage that's been done by, predominantly I would suggest by COVID, there's a lot of good work's been done.
We need to keep moving, but Jim, you were putting your hand up there just either through frustration or through excitement. I wasn't sure which.
No, maybe a bit of both. But people will be surprisingly giving in terms of their information and their data when they perceive relevance, appropriateness, and value. And I think that's as simple as that. If they perceive a value, and Neil touched upon it earlier, phoning up, double keying or double giving of information is hugely frustrating when we're working across other industries in their personal life that know us better than we perhaps even imagine at times. So almost encountering our industry is the exception in the current world.
I mentioned when we started, and of course you have experience of this, and everybody at home watching us today has their own professional experience of this, and possibly personal as well, is the breakdowns, right? So as the technology, Jim, is used more, and I'm thinking of AIs augmented or well-programmed bots are dealing with your inquiry, you can lose some of that humanity, you can lose some of that trust. So how do we start to turn that around and start to, we can only do a short thing right now, but what are the key steps to start to look at your technologies and how they're dealing with customers when there's no human involved?
Yeah, and I think it's for an awful lot of companies, and this is where some of the new startups and the more innovative insurers are really catching a pace, because they don't have the same legacy, and where a lot of the traditional insurers have got is we've been through many maybe mergers, acquisitions. We've seen a number of the large insurers disappear off the high street, and I think one of the challenges is pulling all of that data and intellectualizing it, as I said previously. And there is capabilities, as you said, through APIs and such like, to make that happen. And I think those are some of the kind of crucial investments that some of the large insurers will probably have to make over the coming months and years.
Absolutely. Dan.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. So I think this is where we can start taking a leaf out of other industries. So if you look at social media, some of the big houses and players there have had trust issues. So now they try and make it very clear when you sign up, and if you take LinkedIn, how your data is being used, your privacy rights by clicking on these different things. So really we need to be very clear with our customers on what we're doing to make it, so that they're in control, and that you can tick the various boxes on how it's being used, and you can evidence that we're not mistreating that data.
Clarity control, very important. Amy, did you put your hand up as well to say something?
Yeah. I did, and I was thinking, that this whole subject of like empathetic AI, I mean, perhaps a personal view here, but I think AI can only go so far, and actually how you then free people up using AI to do what humans do, which is empathy, I think is going to be crucial to our success. So one of the best compliments I've seen, normally I end up sort of with the complaints and issues come across my desk, but actually a really, really fantastic example of a compliment was, we'd been chasing or the data flagged that an individual hadn't returned a form to us. Now an AI had chased that for 4 times. One of our handlers picked that up and said, that person hasn't responded to me for 4 occasions. They picked up the phone and said, I've noticed that you've not responded. I just wanted to check everything was okay. And actually that person was having a really, really tough time. And actually that human intervention there, enabled by somebody flagging that we haven't heard back from this customer, was just a really great example of the two working in harmony for me.
And it goes back very much to what Sue was saying. Actually you can check out how the person is doing, even if that's not directly connected to the inquiry the problem they have right now with the insurer. Actually, you're dealing with that person. It's going to grease their wheels. It's going to make sure that they feel, okay, now I can talk to this person. Let's keep moving. We could carry on with this for some time, of course. Neil, Opti-channel, we promised we'd talk about it. How important is Opti-channel? Perhaps if you want to define it from your point of view as well. But first of all, we had multi, then we had omni, and now we're at Opti.
Yeah, I mean, probably is a good start with the definition. So yeah, the omni-channel is the kind of current best practice where customers should be able to kind of engage with you on their preferred channel along whatever the customer journey is. Whereas Opti-channel is the insurer determines the channel based on the type of engagement. And I get kind of quite passionate about this. It's really easy to kind of have the magpie effect, and you just look after the next shiny thing and you move on. I mean, if we kind of take a step back and look at the insurance industry itself, I think collectively we've all kind of spoken about there needs to be change. We need to do things differently. That's really difficult. It's not easy to do that, and a lot of this is technology-based, data-based. We've got 50 different systems. We don't have one view of the customer. Is it important? Yes. Is doing the basics as important? 100%. So with this, for me, it's like if you're at a point where you can go to Opti, fantastic. If where do you start? Where do you end? You'll never end. I think my view on this is like really think big, start small, but run really fast. Like have a plan, move through, understand your key customer interactions. Are you using the right channels? If you're not using Opti, but you've got still a great engagement, like Amy was saying, is like, hey, in this instance, we kind of divert into someone picks up the phone. Perfect. That's great.
Yeah. And Amy, this is a stupid question, I think. Which channels do you think are most suited towards that? Or is it just the definition tells us everything, really. The customer chooses.
I think you've answered your own question, Lindley. I think the whole point of Opti-channel is, it's the one that works best for the customer at that particular moment. But I think Neil makes a great point that there is a danger that potentially we assume just because a customer contacted us through this channel first time, that's the one that we'd offer up first. It might not be the one that they want to use. So still that ability to seamlessly move between them, I think is absolutely crucial.
Yeah. Jim,
Yeah, I just think Amy's point is really important in that, the more of the less value tasks that we can automate and take out of the customer's hands, the more value we can add through the personal conversations. And I similar to Amy, I was at the tight end of some of these conversations with the customers, and actually it's the it's nothing to do with cover, it's nothing to do with really potentially even the claim, it's nothing to the real value add that the individual can add, i.e. the telephone or whatever, is beyond that. It's personal, and it's the intimacy that brings the real trust and affinity with the brand or the customer eventually.
Well, again, along with clarity and confidence, the word intimacy has come up a couple of times, Jim, and it's that really up close and personal view where you can also back off when the customer wants you to. It's very much a choice there. Before we move on to the final section, transparency and clarity, Sue, throughout the customer journey. And in brief, I guess all I can really ask you is, how important is it and why to have transparency and clarity, not just at the start when you onboard somebody, but at every single stage, whatever I need as a customer in my minimum 4 interactions a year with you?
Well, yeah, I was going to move to those 4 interactions. I mean, they were covered earlier. You probably got the renewal, inception, renewal, claims, maybe some personalised element, midterm. So it's about really, well, I suppose we going back through all of our the conversations from the start. It's not, it's a grudge purchase. If you don't know what you're purchasing, if all you're seeing is the press out there that, COVID did a lot of damage, but the press don't tend to want to ever post really good stories about insurance companies. I've never read too many. It's sort of they didn't do so well in the floods. This happened. It's not news if it's good news that they really want to print.
As a long-time former journalist, I have to say I have to explain this to people many times, and I don't like it. But the highest impact, unfortunately, is often with negative stories, and to have a go at somebody, to say somebody was very, very happy today. Is it going to bring people to it's a problem though, and it means it's up to insurers to do that.
And there's a huge amount of work that's being done behind the scenes to give an empathetic claims service to ensure that the sort of reading age for policy documents is 13, so that there's a real understanding to highlight what's not covered. So yes, transparency throughout the journey is absolutely vital, because you're not dealing with people who are experts in what can be a complex subject.
Absolutely. I have to move on. Jim, I can see you bursting to say something there, but we'll keep on moving on for the second. Before we do move on, just a quick reminder to send in your questions as soon as you have one. We've got some coming through already to my little screen here. Thanks very much. I will look through them as soon as we're live with your questions in around about 7, 8, 9 minutes time. Now, we've had some really good questions in so far, and we will take a look at those for around about 15 minutes. So very simple. Post your questions in the Ask the Panel section, where you can on the right-hand side of the screen. And we've talked about so far the tools and technologies. We've talked about how to reshape the insurer-customer relationship. So let's keep on moving until we come to your questions. Now let's talk about how you as a business and as a team can focus on the needs of the future customer. How can you rebuild and, most importantly, bring trust fully into the customer relationship? Dan, first of all, let's start with the workforce. How do the internal ways of working need to change, culture really, and what skills are needed, do you think, Dan?
Yeah, so I think it will be, I don't think it's going to happen overnight, as I think some of the guys have already mentioned. So there's going to see an increase in automation, more advanced analytics, use of external ecosystems. So we're going to need talent with the right mindset. They're going to need to get more used to working in a constantly changing environment. Many of the tasks will be sort of semi-automated or machine supported that they're going to have to kind of work with. And undoubtedly, we're going to end up with sort of reskilling programs as we start needing more kind of data scientists and cloud experts. But I think it'll be more gradual than some commentary where it's not going to happen overnight.
Really. What about the rest of the panel there? Anyone else have a think about the future people that you need? Yes, Jim, first of all, who would you like to work with you?
Yeah, well, I think it's about giving the tools to do their job first and foremost. And I think, the point I was going to make is, I had a customer not too long ago where they were actually asking their individuals to get that old word again, intimate and close with their customers right from the outset of the call. But actually, at the same time, there was 56 different systems that individual could have been coming in and out of during one claim process. So, we need to work out and invest in how do we give those talented individuals the tools to do their job properly. And that, I think it's all too easy, and I'm sure the customer on the end of the phone believes it to be a difficult individual that they're speaking with, but very often these individuals are extremely talented, extremely keen to do the right thing, but they're just unfortunately not got the tools to do the job properly. But yeah, I mean, coming back to your point on talent, I think the industry actually has got a huge amount of talent, but I think, seeing young, new, diverse and innovative talent coming into the industry will be a huge help.
Amy, what do you think? Who would you like to be working next to you in the years to come?
I've got some amazing colleagues. I'd like to be able to continue to work with them, but with new skills. So Dan talked about it. I think we as an industry have a real moral imperative to be able to help people upskill and reskill. So I mean, we actually, and just reflecting on Jim's point as well, we've recently launched some digital and automation academies, which I think we all recognise as important future skills. And it started out a couple of days a week working with some of our teams. But 100% of people who've been through that have opted to take it on full time. And that's not just kind of the young talent that you referenced, Jim, but it's also people who've been in the industry for 30 odd years. I mean, I think it was Dan who'd been in the industry 30 years. If I look as good as Dan in 30 years in this industry, I'll feel pretty good. But people that are willing to take a risk and sort of change career, and I think that's to be lauded, and we should support people in doing so.
Yeah, Neil, what do you think?
Yeah, I think what's interesting is there's a common kind of word as well that kind of comes up in all that, and I agree. Let's call it, and not derogatory, but the grassroots, on the ground, in the trenches, in the teams. But at an industry level, there needs to be, it's highly regulated. It's perceived difficult because, as Jim said, there's 50 systems that you need to go through to get to something. It doesn't mean you have to rip everything out, but at the top level, it needs to be on the agenda at the C level with regards to the customer experience, the customer interaction, however you want to frame it, is central, which will drive out the kind of like the best strategy in the world. To say if they don't meet in the middle and have the right leaders and the right people to execute against it, it's going to be difficult. But I think at an industry level, we need to see some of those kind of 2 or 3 key insurers that are like, we're going to be digital disruptors. We're going to change the way we've always done and perceived insurance to be. Yeah. But I think that then it becomes super exciting.
I also, the word diverse workforce was used earlier, and I'd like to see in the insurance industry much more than it currently is, a diverse and inclusive workforce that reflects our customer base. Yeah. I know we're moving there, but we've got a long way to go.
Well, I mean, it comes down to the same thing as we all talk about, which is without diversity of people, you're not going to get diversity of ideas, not diversity of approaches to what you do, and it won't be as relevant. So it's a win-win-win all round if you start to widen out the people that work for you, isn't it? Neil, back to you for a second. Look, big change of the claims department, of course, when prevention becomes the new model, which it kind of is at the moment in many ways. But what do you think the biggest changes ahead are for claims from your point of view, Neil?
Yeah, well, I think we've touched on it already. I mean, just for time's sake, I think we see 3 things, and it's probably broader than claims, but we see, I think Dan mentioned it, cloud computing, like just the changes around the systems and the help. So we see cloud computing and acceleration there, big data, how do we use the data, AI, machine learning, and that's all we see a lot of kind of our insurance customers trying to understand, how do we engage with the millennials? How do we engage with personalization, customer engagement in an interactive way, quick, kind of like maybe 1, 2, 3 interactions, text, TikTok, whatever it may be. I think it's that mindset change that is the engagement level that's going to really change.
Yeah. Dan, you mentioned video chat along the way. When that's very important as well, isn't it? In some way, there needs to be quite a lot of confidence really to be on the line with customers in video form and give them a really good set of answers to what they need.
Yeah, but I think if we're adding, if it's at the right time for the customer, because some of the claims it's a distress scenario, and if you've got someone that's an expert at the scene, kind of virtually with them, it can add enormous value. So I think if it's appropriately used, then yeah, we should be disrupting in that space.
Amy, what's your thought on what are your thoughts on bots and automating that process? I mean, you know, I've spoken to quite a few AI experts over the years, and they favour broadly becoming more human. So, you know, doing what we've all talked about over the years, which is let the automation be dealt with by the number crunchers, the computers, and then the people that work with you are better at being human. Do you think that's true, or is that just a bit of a dream world?
No, I think it's true. I think we talked about it before. For me, it's how do you free people up to do things that are uniquely human. So yeah, agree.
Yeah. What about Jim? What about pricing and revenue? When it becomes preventative, when insurance becomes more preventative, what impact do you think that will have on pricing?
I think the inevitable consequence could be that pricing could be lowered, which would be fantastic. Affordability is big on the agendas for most insurers, and making sure our footprint is far broader than it currently is. I do think diversification will come alongside that, though, because they're clearly the revenue offset will be by creating a bigger footprint and a wider audience, so to speak, but also through diversification and moving into innovative products and kind of crossing up sales that are maybe not there at the moment and we don't anticipate as being part of an insurance proposition, but actually, why not?
Yeah. Apart from Neil, just talking to you, and it may be something you can't answer, but I warn you in advance. But I apologise. You always get one of these from me. But we know that this is all about benefiting the customer, right? The customers should get a lot of benefit out of this. But what is ultimately the benefit to insurers? I mean, yes, you can say probably the benefit will be you won't be left behind. But in terms of the business itself, what positive benefit should insurers, do you feel, be focusing on to make this work, to keep everyone motivated, to make sure that everyone's driving in the right direction? What is the benefit?
Yeah, so I think I would answer that in a way of, like, regardless of the industry, but insurance, we're still a business. Yeah. So we're delivering a service, but we also want to make sure that from a profitability and everything else that we're doing. So what we see, if you can build loyal customers, that the data tells us that they will spend and stay with you. They'll spend 80% more with you on products, services, whatever that may be, if they've got value and if there's loyalty, if there's trust, etc. So I think it comes down to still the customer, the experience. You look after them, and they will stay loyal. The data tells us that. So there's business benefit as well as, I think we spoke earlier. Someone was mentioning around the kind of like the other elements of the social element of we're good, we're helping the environments, we're putting sprinklers in here, this has come from us, and hydrants and all that kind of thing.
Yeah. That was Amy. Yeah, exactly. Jim, yeah.
No, I was just going to agree with that point. And and in terms of driving the agenda, that I think it was Lemonade the other day were on say electric cars will be hugely discounted in terms of insurance. But so there is, back to our original roots, there is a capability for us to drive the agenda across a lot of these things and actually accelerate the agenda.
There is no other industry in a better position to reassure people that to help them as they take their journey into the world today, but also to help them out of trouble. I mean, it's a great position to be in. Unfortunately, of course, it's not easy to tap into that. Final question before we go into it. We've got a couple of audience questions from you. I'd like you to get in touch if you can. Use the Ask the Panel section on the screen right now and get a question in. There's plenty of space and we'd love to hear from you. So we've got some here, but we'd like to hear more. So final question, maybe to Amy, if you wouldn't mind. Ultimately, and it could be a yes or no answer, maybe you'll say more, will insurers become trusted advisors and trusted life partners? Is this inevitably and inexorably the way that the insurance industry is going?
I won't say yes, I won't say no. I'll say if we're brave enough to lead, then we should.
Yes.
I think for me, it's about maybe seeing insurance with optimism rather than pessimism, and letting people know that throughout that kind of life journey, if we want to be a life partner, that we're there through the moments that matter. So I think we can. I think it's in our gift, but we need to grab it.
And it kind of goes back to a word that Jim used earlier on, courage.
Yeah.
Risk. Without risk, there's no courage. I mean, that's a lovely metaphorical thing to say, but really, Dan, how much courage does it really take to make this all work?
Yeah, it will take one of the large companies just to make the big jump, and everyone will follow. I think the technology at the moment does have limitations. I think ultimately what will happen, I think the do nothing option really isn't on the table, and there'll be other entrants from, the big Googles or the Amazons that have got the scale to kind of maybe do our job better. So it will definitely happen, but the horizon may be longer than we think, sort of 5 to 10 years.
Yeah. Sue, I mean, many people on our panel today, you included, have 30 years plus experience in the industry. Perhaps we've been talking about trust, and we've been talking about how to, build a relationship for the last sort of 10 years, perhaps. But are you positive? Do you believe now that, with your overarching view of the industry, that the position is better than it has been to make this really work, to practically turn the industry into something that is really valued by customers, and that they know the service they're getting from you?
I mean, we've got a way to go, and we're coming from a backdrop of recent damage. Done to reputation, but there's no reason why we can't. If we're brave, if we're innovative, and somebody will take this and run with it, as my other panel representatives have said, they will. When it happens, I think probably 5 to 10 years is good. But if somebody took it, everybody would run behind it, because there's real tangible benefits to the customer, and all the time we're talking about customer journeys. Really what we're talking about is client needs, and so long as we can deliver on client needs, then they will stay with us. And that's how you build trust. That's how, with transparency, with all the things we've discussed. So long as we satisfy that client need and we get this right, then everybody will follow, because there's benefits across the industry.
I've already been filtering in some questions. Neil, what I'll do, I'll come back to you in a second. I've already been filtering in some questions from you at home into our conversation towards the end. Let's go to another question right here. Inbound engagement can be met with omni-channel experience, but are insurers looking to do more outbound engagement? And what is perceived to be the best platform? Social, mobile apps, SMS, email. Now, we've talked about, Neil, if you wouldn't mind, now it's a tough question, because we've already gone to Opti in our conversation today, but outbound engagement, pushing out the information, hoping that will produce a nice response. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think absolutely. I think that the danger is that you can kind of do too much. It becomes a marketing and a selling thing. And then typically when you hear about that we're going to reach out to our customers, it's like, here's 10 services that we offer. Would you like one of them? It's not necessarily about that. I think it's about picking the right communication. Are you trying to drive a conversation? How are you engaging? What is the outcome that you want? And I think it's more around getting to know your customer, driving a conversation, as opposed to selling a product.
Yes.
And the channel choice, this may be quite provocative, but my view is, like, in a way, it doesn't matter. Like, the worst thing to do is like do nothing and wait for someone to do something. It's like, understand your customers, go for the 80-20 rule, engage with them. They will tell you by definition of directly or indirectly whether that's working or not, and then change your program and approach. But don't be, we talk about courage, don't be scared to start something.
Yeah. Before we, I'll go to Jim in a second, but while we're talking about pushing out information, we also want you at home to we want to pull in some information from you. If you do have a very brief moment before you leave us today, we've got a few more questions to go. Take a very brief moment to rate today's webinar so far. A feedback form should be appearing on your feed. It's right there. Your response is totally confidential, but really useful to us. So please do let us know what you thought of our discussion so far. Let's go back on to that. Jim, what do you think about that? You know, the pushing and pulling of information to get customers involved.
Yeah, I was just going to make the point. In the consumer world, the channel choice, and even to an extent the product choice, isn't really ours to make. You know, it's theirs to make, and that's why us getting to know them so much better will determine, you know, channel choice and even product choice for that matter. So just really, I suppose, augmenting what Neil had already said to some extent.
Yeah, Amy, what do you think?
Agree with that in the main, but probably disagree ever so slightly, which is, I think if we're making outbound communication, we need to think not just about what a customer's channel choice might be, but the message we're going to give them. So, you know, if a customer chooses to interact via WhatsApp all the time, but we need to give a really difficult message, I'm not sure that's going to be appropriate. So I think it is thinking about the customer, but also what we need to say to them, because that might also determine some of the outbound channel choice.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's keep moving on. Question here, how do you provide the innovative services discussed today when you have your existing processes which accommodate the past and not the future? How do you balance the process and system change required to fully innovate? Look, it's a massive question, one that's ever been with us. But Dan, just want to throw it to you for a second. As people transition into new technologies that we've talked about, you and I have talked about a bit today, how do you start to do that? Is it, you know, a little step in the right direction? Is it test and learn, the whole ethos of that? Is there something else, you know, because eventually you've got to get rid of the old and bring in the new?
Yeah, no, definitely. So I think, well, again, it depends how brave you've been. So we've got examples within Market Study where we've created our own startup. So rather than, and so that's an extreme where we've just created just a completely new company, no legacy. But then on a smaller scale, we'll find a little use case that, and then run it as a pilot. And as you say, cycles of learning, you know, not try to boil the ocean in one go. But I think the biggest mistake, and I think many have already said it, is to do nothing. So we just need to, you need to find the right opportunity, and then we've definitely got the right people to get the job done. They just need to have the right environment and be empowered to kind of to try.
Yeah, very much what Neil was saying. And final question, I'm going to throw it to Neil if you don't mind. And it may be something that you can answer, or maybe we can adapt slightly. How big is the problem of data quality in predictive analytics, right? So, I mean, again, we could have an hour on this, but in order to make sure communications work, that you have good information on your customers that's nearly real time, if not real time, quality's got to be good. So I suppose that's something that we haven't even covered, is focusing on the quality of what you're taking in.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, it's a 6-month webinar to talk about that just in itself. I think the key thing is, we talk about engaging the customers. We talk about, kind of being brave and doing all this good stuff. The insurance industry is probably one of the industries that uses data pretty much as a product, as we said, to do the preventative, to really kind of drive into that. So therefore, if that's the foundation is wrong, you're going to start delivering incorrect, not appropriate services, etc., which then it goes back to, it dilutes trust.
Yeah.
It's for me, it's around what are the processes that we've got. This is who you are. We spoke about like engaging with the customer and saying, this is who you are, this is what you've got. It's starting with, is this correct? Have we got those quality mechanisms in place to keep enhancing? And that's one of the biggest challenges, is you've got 30 years of data that you've collected in 15 different systems. Which view is correct?
Ultimately, as we finish today, we come back to a word that came up very early on: confidence, but also clarity. If I'm an insurer looking to do one thing today to take us from pandemic times into the new future, right? So what would you focus on, Neil? Would it be clarity, building confidence? Would it be your team? And obviously everyone is different, but if there was one thing you could pick out, what would it be?
Engaging customers.
Right, engaging customers, absolutely. And just from the panel there, hands up if you agree with that. Engaging customers. Jim, 2. Okay, and Sue, what do you feel? Yeah, so go on then. That's very nice. Here's all we have time for. I'm glad you did that, Sue. That's a full house. I do hope you've enjoyed the past hour, found the tips and insights from our panel really useful. Thanks for sending in your questions. We couldn't get to them all. They did come through quite thick and fast towards the end. If you do have a minute, leave us. Do give us that wider feedback on the banner just below us. We really value your opinion. Let us know what you thought of today's discussion. That'd be so useful to us. We just want to make these things really relevant, useful to you, as we talked about today for insurance customers. But that's all we have time for today. Thanks again for joining us. For now, stay safe. See you soon. All the best.